For me, this journey really began quite unexpectedly. I trained as an architect, and I had this new job lined up in Australia, and I really wanted to get there without taking an aeroplane. And so naturally, being aged 21, I jumped straight on Google to find the answer and started looking for a way to hitchhike from England to Australia. And when I did, this just popped up on my screen. Oh, sorry, oh, there we go. Move my slides. So this boat just popped up on my laptop, and it was a boat that held the round the world speed record at the time. It had circumnavigated the planet, but did it running on 100% biodiesel, so fuel that's come from all sorts of renewable sources. And I wrote to the skipper and I said, how do I get a job on board your boat, which was now going from England to Australia? And he said, well, come and meet us in Brighton in the UK for the weekend, and we'll see how you get on. So I showed up in Brighton with enough stuff to last me for a weekend, and didn't end up going home for another 923 days. So this boat, it ended up being my ticket I was looking for to Australia. But what I didn't realize is that it was going to trigger this entirely new career that I was never expecting. So we set off around the world. And inside, the boat wasn't quite as glamorous as that sleek silver exterior might have made you thought. This is the inside of my home for that first year I was away. And I remember having journalists on the boat who sort of said to me, don't you find it so claustrophobic living in this environment? And I remember thinking, having grown up in the same house my whole life, I was suddenly taking off around the world with a group of people who thought in a completely different way to me. And it was the most open-minded space I could have imagined, and so far from feeling claustrophobic. But along the way, there were so many things that I was never expecting to see on this trip around the world. We saw the rising sea levels, that was meaning that remote islands couldn't actually grow food in the ground because their soil was so salty for their crops to grow. They couldn't catch fish because the commercial vessels had emptied their seas of the fish that they knew how to catch. But the knock-on effect of a lot of this was a new reliance on importing plastic packaged food and drink that we would then see washed up on the many remote beaches of these Pacific islands, and of course being used and consumed in the local communities. It was then in between each of these islands that I had days of this open ocean. And for me, that time at sea really made me realize that when you're at sea, you're constantly reacting to the changes in the environment around you. As the wind and the waves shift, you have to respond and adjust your course. And this is what made me think I actually needed to adjust my own course, my career, and rather than go on and take that architecture job, I wanted to try and tackle some of what I was seeing unexpectedly in the South Pacific. And the issue that just jumped out at me, every island that we landed on, every beach that I walked on, was this issue of plastic. And so I went back to live on this little island in Tonga, in the very remote South Pacific. And it looks like paradise from here. There's an amazing turquoise ocean and white sandy beaches, but down on the ground, it really is a different story. And this community is suffering from those things I mentioned before, where their natural resources are so depleted that they have no choice but to rely on importing packaged food and drink that often comes from thousands of miles away. But there's no system to actually then deal with that waste. So it ends up getting dumped on the beach, thrown in the ocean, or burnt. And it was actually that burning of plastic, that really distinctive toxic smell that kept getting at my nose on all of these islands, that led me to find out more about what was that I was breathing in. And I started to learn about these chemicals, dioxins, and also endocrine disruptors that either lead to cancer or they mimic our hormones. And they're really chemicals that we do not want inside our bodies, and the kids living on these little islands don't either.